Victor, go ahead.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was used to the intro. Good morning, everyone. My name is Victor Rocha. I'm the conference chairman for the Indian Gaming Association. My co-host is Jason Giles, the executive director for the Indian Gaming Association. I'd like to welcome you on this very sad day for us, but again, we'd like to welcome everyone. Our guests are Ernest Stevens III and Brandon Yellowbird Stevens. Welcome, gentlemen. Today, we're going to talk about the life and legacy of Ernest Stevens Jr., our glorious leader. Jason, how are you doing this morning, man?
Good. We had a nice Levi Riekert did a nice thing for your dad last night on his platform. Lots of tribal leaders from all around the country. It was quite moving. There was a couple technical interruptions, but it was great. Chance Rush was kind of the MC of it, and it was jovial, it was perfect. It was more, just remembering how funny he was and the way he was to the people that knew him, behind the scenes, off the stage, the people that worked with him. So that was great last night. And we're heading up to Green Bay, of course, for this weekend. So
Right. Well, you know what? Let's start with that. You know what I mean, gentlemen? Could you tell us a little more about the memorial this week?
So on Friday, the services will be held at the United Nation Elementary School, the Turtle School, we would call it. And so, in true form, this was one of the first major purchases after we negotiated our compact with the state of Wisconsin. We built a school under the guise of, education first, community first, with the help of my grandpa, our grandpa, Ernie Stevens Sr., worked in the economic development area. And so that's where our father's wake will be. And so from bringing them from the funeral home to the school, we're going to be greeted by, so we have this car club called the Res Riders. And they're going to um, have our own procession with the Res Riders, uh, bringing us home, bringing dad home to Oneida. And so that Saturday, there's going to be a couple hours, 4 to 7 will be the public viewing. And then at 7 o'clock, they'll have the speakers that will speak on, his life and the eulogy. And then after that, we'll bring them to our traditional longhouse where we hold our ceremonies, and family will be with them overnight. And in the morning, we'll have the services and send them off, have the procession to the burial site, and uh, and then have some paying the last respects to his final resting place at the Oneida Cemetery, the sacred burial grounds.
And the meal back at Turtle School?
Yeah.
Or
Civic, yeah.
so yeah, the meal following the burial services will be at the recreation center in Oneida at Site One, which is called the Civic Center. So but yeah, once you're here, obviously, you won't be able to miss the motorcades and everything. So everybody will get where they need to get to. So that's pretty much it. And one thing to add too is my grandpa pushed the design of the Turtle School, inspired by my great grandma Maria, his mother, my dad's grandma, because she was Turtle Clan and she's a turtle fanatic. She always every year we always give her turtles for her birthday, so that was her thing, and that's what inspired him to do the Turtle School. So that's why it's called that. Just to add that in there.
And so lastly, at the Civic Center was also another pivotal kind of stepping stone in my dad's life is basketball, of course. He played basketball, and he's told the story many times. Is Civic Center, they had to clear out the basketball um, opportunities at some point to clear the way to have bingo, and which would actually pay for the lights. And so the bingo, which started in the late 70s, that would provide paying the bills to keep the lights on. That's where we we believe gaming started, at the Civic Center in downtown Oneida, and he wanted to have his services something there to have them underneath the basket, to
Wow. Is it
think
really?
about
Are
that.
you really?
Yeah, so
Wow. Yeah, because
we'll
he
have to be
told
able.
that story. I mean, that was like such an integral part of his identity. But more importantly, he used it to talk about, the your tribe and the importance of a matriarchal society. You know what I mean? And he told that story so well. And as someone who knew him well, it was that's pretty poignant. We had just had Chairman McCarl join us. Good morning,
Mark,
Chairman.
Good morning, and Ernie and Brandon. Condolences to you guys and your family. So
So as they were just saying, we were talking about the services are going to take at 4 p.m. on Friday for the memorial, and then they have the all night fire burning. All right, also, and I noticed that your sister was putting out volunteers for firekeeping, so the fire is burning right now, right?
10 days.
that,
Yep.
that goes 10 days, right? Yeah.
Yep. Started
Yeah,
Friday.
you know what I don't know if a lot of people understand this, and I know that's kind of ours is a little different, but it's also very important. We have a fire, and it's a very important part of our culture. Would you mind sharing that with us?
I mean, honestly, there's with us is, I'm not exactly sure where the number comes from, 10 days. Tribes do different days. I always joked that when folks shouldn't joke about folks passing, but when they pass away, usually it's 3 or 4 nights in the sub-zero weather. I've sat and had fire kept on some of those nights too, and of course it's beautiful out here, so 10 days should be pretty easy for us. But I'm not sure how exactly 10 days comes from. It's just our particular way that he'll help prepare and help him reach the spirit world. So that's kind of the time it would take to get there, essentially.
I'm always amazed. And Mark, that's like ours, right?
Yeah, except we have the all night wake and the fire's there, but when the sun comes up and or dawn the next morning, that's when the fire goes out. So,
Mm.
but the fire has to be lit.
Yeah,
And
they'll
watch.
started Friday night, the night following his passing, and then so I believe it's Monday night. Is that 10 days? I believe. So there's the same time. That's when they put it out and do all that. So it's new, and it'd be a long 10 days, but a wonderful 10 days as well because so many family and friends are there, and so we'd love to see you guys there. It'd be awesome to see you guys at the fire when you guys get here. So
Oh, we'll be there for sure. We wouldn't miss it for the
We
world.
headed there,
Yeah.
flying there on Friday. So
So are you guys surprised at the reaction in Indian country about the passing of your father? Your dad always played it down. I mean, he had this modesty about him that I thought was very amusing. He was very aware of his impact, but are you surprised? I think I am.
Oh, yes and no. Just
yeah,
surprised because the impact was down to a young man that we grew up with and didn't really know well. Just he had an impact on this guy we went to school with for no particular reason. In his mind, he's like, I didn't know what I did uh to memorable to make him remember me from way back when we were kids, and just things like that. It's just heartwarming, and just you know there's things that we know about him, but then he's the same man everywhere he's at. And whether he's at home, whether he's out in DC, whether he's in the halls of Congress, whether he's in another community, he's the same man. And I think that's the comfort that we know is like, what that is him. And that's the part that's not surprising.
One of the last conversations I had with your father, we were talking, and I wanted him to know about how we felt about him and I've had this conversation with Jason also, and what I was telling him is that, at one point, in the 70s when the tribes didn't have any voice in society and they felt voiceless, they would say, we're going to call AIM, and AIM is going to come here, and AIM's going to show up on our reservation, and you guys will be sorry. And then that morphed into, we're going to call Ernie Stevens. And when Ernie Stevens get here, you guys are going to be sorry. And it was really like that too, you know, and we had this conversation and I think he understood that, you know, his he had grown into this something more. He represented something more, and I think he was very comfortable in that role is being bringing people hope, you know, and that's what he did. And I think that's you know when I think about him and his traveling, and you know, and Ernest and I had this conversation the other night. Is just I can't imagine you guys. He would be home, kiss you guys, watch you blow out the candle, and then jump back in the car and go to another reservation somewhere. You know what I mean? Because they needed him, and he felt that they wanted him there, and they did want him there. You know what I mean? So I'm amused at when I see the word icon next to your dad's name because it seems so appropriate. You know? And
Well,
go ahead, Chairman.
yeah, I just want to interject a thing that I vaguely remember. I've been trying to find more detail about it in the last 24 hours or so. But I mean, there's probably any number of ways that Ernie came into that presence and that stature. Um, you know, but the one I want to highlight is an anecdote um, that is probably poorly crafted on my part. But here's the gist of it is this: there was this time in in the earlier days of when Senator McCain was on the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, and there was testimony happening. I think Ernie was probably at he was a witness, you know, in front of the committee, but so was Phil Hogan. And the topic of the day was the minimum internal control standards, mix, and and there had been this line of questioning between Senator McCain and Phil Hogan, who was the chairman of the NIGC at the time, National Indian Gaming Commission. I suppose I shouldn't speak in acronyms and stuff. And so there was a particular line where, um, and I think that there was in context there was this case I think that involving somebody with the Seminole tribe in Florida, and was a non-tribal member, and for McCain, you know, there wasn't enough regulation. I think that was the whole idea, and so you know, I think he was probably entertaining wanting to broaden NIGC's scope to having regulatory jurisdiction over Class 3 gaming and you know, broaden IGRA, I suppose. And there was a comment Phil Hogan made that was something like, you know what, the tribal regulators do better when somebody's looking over their shoulder. And that kind of remark and the line of questioning from Senator McCain was just too much, I believe. I don't remember the actual exchange. I just know that there was an exchange that began then when Chairman Stevens he couldn't hold his. I don't think he felt it was appropriate anymore to just stay silent and not intervene. And he spoke up and defended tribal gaming. He defended tribal regulation. You know, the most over. In fact, that's where our band name came from. The most overregulated gaming industry in the United States is gaming, and went through the litany. And I think he must have used Senator McCain's own words that came out of the congressional record or something against him. And Senator McCain came unglued as he was given to
To
do.
do, yeah.
And you know, he got emotional and was, you know, gesturing to Ernie, and Ernie was not having it, you know, and he was standing firm in his defense of tribal gaming, tribal regulation, and holding the line. And so that kind of, you know, knowing where that line is in terms of being a statesman, you know, being a diplomat, and being a warrior, uh, Ernie had this great sense about that, and he would apply it in those situations. But that was a potential disastrous moment. I can think of myself, for instance, in that instance. I might not have been as even keeled as Ernie presented in that situation. For instance, I don't know. That was a younger version of myself 20 or 20 years ago too. So, you know, and I think is might be a little cheesy. At the risk of being cheesy, I know Ernie was a boxer. I know he was a basketball player, and I draw on baseball all the time in my meetings, and so the whole thing is that uh, we've got ideas we bring into our spaces that when they make sense. And Ernie has a temperament of a boxer, I think, in many situations where they could be heated, they could be emotional, and a boxer who does that isn't going to survive, into the next round. They have to be more strategic, they have to be more judicious, and in the end, the person who scores more hits wins. And then the decisiveness of like a power forward, knowing when to act and not second guessing yourself. And so I just wanted to mention that because I think Ernie brought that to the table, and it was part of his aura, it was part of his presence, and that's one of the things I think I'm still hoping to learn from, and I think a whole bunch of us are.
I don't think McCain ever got over that either. I don't think he ever got over that too, because after that, right, guys? But Jason, you spent a lot of time with him on the Hill too. I mean, that was kind of your job there, right?
Well, and let me ask you, E3 and Brandon, one of the things that I've tried to tell folks is, his statesman thing, however, it was a refrain, it was a repeated phrase he used, but he actually lived it. And I know this because I don't know if he ever talked to you guys or said anything, but the way the commercial gaming industry was treating basically NIGA and your dad when I first got here in 2006, it was frosty and just a lot of brush offs, a lot of they don't know what they're talking about or doing. And your dad, Frank Fahrenkampf, was just downright rude to him often.
That's
And that and I don't know how your dad put up with that because I know that it had to have burned him because that probably took him right back to everything he experienced in downtown LA and then outside of Green Bay with the surrounding counties there. But did he ever talk about, that kind of flack that came from the other people in the industry? And then frankly, you saw it here on Capitol Hill, like, you couldn't even tell Senator McCain what his own words were without him getting, angry. Or, like, you're not going to tell me what I said, and that's the way a lot of their attitudes were towards your dad's messaging at a lot of these conferences, Bingo World and all those old conferences, the one down in Biloxi, Victor.
Southern Gaming Conference.
Yeah, I hate to, it wasn't just in the South. It was also in Las Vegas where these CEOs were just rude to him and like, okay, get away, it
Well,
was.
that because that had to do with us coming in. We weren't supposed to be successful. We were supposed to be,
Mhm.
we were supposed to roll over and we were never supposed to be successful. And I think that was at the root of what McCain was getting at. And your father just, it's like one of those pictures of a guy walking through a snow blizzard, you know what I mean, with the jacket tight and he's just powering through it. That was Ernest, he was just like, he went forward and, and I apologize, gentlemen, but I actually, he and I had conversations about this at times and especially with Fahrenkoff and him, he wouldn't let that stuff get him down. The job was too big. You know what I mean? He was a bigger man than that, man. I wouldn't. I'm petty. You know what I mean? I'm petty. He was a much bigger man, literally and figuratively. But gentlemen, again, I didn't mean to
Yeah. How
answer
did
your
your dad,
question.
did you ever see him have to deal with all that? It's basically racism in a different form.
I'll just jump in and to answer your question, Jason. I think he'll be the first one to tell you and go into some of Chairman McCarl's remarks as well as there was a time he might have responded a little differently.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of boxing and throwing blows, but I think he never, for me personally, he never really shared a lot of specific stories. He would use stories similar to that one to teach me something if I had done something and responded maybe a little too harshly to something. So there's different times like that through life where he would use those as teaching opportunities. But he would always say that you can tell he lived it and experienced it. He'd always say that there's people out there that will try to stop you, try to stop any country, and we just have to keep fighting forward. We got to do it with the right mindset and the right heart and spirit, and that's kind of what he embodied. And he would teach by example, but he would use those as teaching opportunities as well. Usually when we screwed up, at least in my case. So I've heard stories about different things and things like that, so yeah, I've heard some of those things, but yeah, it's always a teaching opportunity for me.
Yeah, I would, add just he always made things positive. Always made things positive. And he said, "Hey, we got to push through. We have to push through. We have to get to work." I know all you guys heard those comments all the time. We have to get to work. We have to push through. And that's what he did in his life, growing up in LA and, near Skid Row, north side Milwaukee. He had to push through. There was no other choice other than to push through. And he became a regimented man, just doing things the same way all the time to create the consistency. So 5 papers a day, his coffee and his drink, he had a certain thing he did every single day, which helped kind of settle him down. And he's a guy that he wants to know what's going to happen. And he wants to know, and so he can adjust. And so, like as Tyson's favorite quote is, everyone has a plan until you get hit.
Mhm.
And he knew he was going to get hit. And that plan was always to either counter, come back, and always have something ready. And understanding that we'll get looked at in a different way if we act like them. So we have to toe the line. And that's where the famous quote statesman come from my grandma Marge. He attributed a lot of comments to a lot of different people that were the same comments. But he always attributed that to my grandma Marge. They say you have to be a statesman. You have to be a statesman. And you have to understand what the goal is. The goal isn't to win the argument. The goal is to provide for a community.
Mhm.
And if I let myself get in front of the goal, then that goal won't happen. So those are the things that really helped, our dad maintain his enormous personality as well as this enormous temper that he had to grow out of as a young man, and that turned into positive action and his work ethic.
Wow. That, I think, I think everyone that's on this call knows that the impact that he left in the industry. He wasn't just a leader, he was a friend. I think a friend to everyone. And again, I think when he showed up on these, I would talk to him and he would be on the road going somewhere, him and Ricky or him and your mom, and in the car going, and it was really, I mean, it takes a special person to have that type of commitment to your community, and it was 100%. It wasn't uh qualified. It was he gave it all his heart. um
One thing, Victor, we did post in the chat box, there's an agenda for the services this weekend. And also it's worth, if you're not going to the services, that's fine. You might want to download that. It's got information on where to, send tributes and everything like that. So that's in the chat box there. Uh, please use that for your own information. And then secondly, the folks are posting stuff on here and commenting and remembering your father. And we, one of the things Ernie always talked, a lot about his mom and your grandma. And, he never talked about what his life was growing up in the streets of LA. And, and then when his dad was working for Nixon administration, Wilson Pipes just posted, Wilson's dad and your grandpa both worked for Nixon here in DC. And, funny thing is, Ernie always called Wilson Wolf. And every time he'd be talking Wolf this, Wolf, it's like, who the hell are you talking about? So, oh, Wilson Pipestem. But that's how, old Ernie and how far he goes back. He knows Wilson's nickname, but, you know, he never talked much about his story growing up, and it was really fascinating, just the whole LA connection, because there's a lot of, and it's rung with me, and there's a lot of Oklahoma Indians in the LA area, mostly due to the boarding school days, and a lot of people just stayed there once they left the boarding school. I had an aunt that stayed there. There's 17,000 Muskogee Creek citizens in the LA area, and your dad knew them all. I mean, he knew all those old Indians from the 60s and 70s that were in the LA area. It was a really and that was a crazy time to grow up there because it was not the LA today where, everything is priced out and you don't get the blue collar working class like you had back then, and you could just freely go wherever you want. Now it's, all mansions and stuff. But he was there at a time that was very influential in the making of this country. And your dad carried all that. And I thought that, I don't know, he didn't talk that much about it. I think, he wanted to stay strong with Oneida and Oneida Reservation. And I don't know if folks there held it against him that he wasn't, there from, age 0 to 17 on Oneida. But, you know, he definitely gained that initial perspective, Victor, of like, how did he keep everybody straight in Indian country? But he had that unique outlook from across the country, knew everybody from every region, and it's because he lived it.
Listen, I'm laughing because he told me he got back to the reservation and he ran into a wall called Charlie Hill, Rick Hill, Norbert Hill. So he had to earn that on the reservation, man. They didn't welcome him with open arms. They said, "Welcome home." He ran into the Hill brothers, man, and he was like, he had to earn his stripes on that reservation. He has some stories. Am I right, guys? He had some stories about basketball, and Rick and Charlie would just ride him all the way to the very end. Charlie would not give him a break, man. And your dad, oh my God, and your dad would just like hold his temper. You know what I mean? And Charlie would be saying, and he would just, that was the statesman that I saw, man, that he did, he did, you know what I mean? But he, you know what, you're right. He wasn't born on the reservation and he came back later, but you know what? He absorbed everything, and he couldn't wait to get back. And that's where he got his strength, one of the last times that we spoke, we talked about his actually in Minnesota about him going on Wounded Knee. He was what, 13 years old, 12 years old, going to Wounded Knee. You know what I mean? He said because I was big, so they thought that I was, an adult. But his mother Marge dropped him off in the perimeter, and she ended up getting arrested, and they had to go in through the back way and being on watch, and I think might have even smoking his first cigarette and something like that. So, when he finally did get back, it was such a big deal that he knew where he belonged, and that was in the reservation with his people. So I apologize for taking that, but
He may have had a cigarette or two on Hollywood Boulevard, Victor. Come on.
You think before then?
So,
You think
but
before then, maybe?
yeah, but no, I mean, yeah, it's fascinating, and that's something that we're going to highlight here at the building, and your dad has a lot of personal effects here still, and we hope that you and the family will come to the IGA headquarters at some point in the future. No rush, and we'd like to do a small tribute here as well for the folks in DC, because he knew, and preferably at a time when Congress, if they ever get back to work, that because there's a lot of folks here that have been calling and asking where to send cards. Hakeem Jeffries asked, just a big outpouring, and to think he went from Mark, he went from battling with you guys against all these commercial guys that were just really, you guys know better than anyone how nasty they were and how condescending and just looked down on Indians and tribes. And your dad had to deal with that and deal with those very same people. And I don't think I ever heard one of them ask anything about it, where he was from, or they never wanted to know the person. It was just, they already stereotyped him and were walking past him.
That's right. It was good to know that Ernie had our backs, at the national level. But just to underscore your point there, Jason, those people that you mentioned, people, these were the corporations and the individual owners of the Nevada casinos, the big Nevada casinos at the time, under the banner of the NRA, the Nevada Resorts Association. And I think some of those folks are still alive and maybe still
Right.
part of the picture, maybe emeritus here and there.
Some of them came crawling back like nothing ever happened.
Yeah,
and
and
Ernie shook their hands. Yeah.
And,
Oh,
and to get, and then the AGA, the American Gaming Association, headed up by Frank Fahrenkopf, they were like two peas in a pod and protecting turf. Anyway, it's 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 a different day, it's a different era for sure. But at before the changeover, before they came crawling over, like you said, the those were tough times, and Indian gaming was looked down on, and like you said, uh, which meant that we all individually, as individual tribes, individual gaming operations, we knew we had to do things cleaner than the commercial industry. We had to do them better. We had to go the extra mile, even though it may not have been required, not just the minimum required, but we had to do more. And Ernie knew that, and he carried that banner on our behalf as well.
Mhm.
Chairman McCarl, I think you and Chairman Stevens are very similar in a lot of ways. Is that, when you go out there, when you meet tribes and the impact that you have when you attended a reservation or event and stuff like that. Um, what do you think? What do you think made Chairman Stevens special in that way? You know what I mean? What do you think was his gift?
Well, his family, he talked about you guys constantly. And um, I think there's a lot of merit to what I forget, Ernest, if it was you or Brandon said just a bit ago that, the Ernie you saw is the Ernie we saw. I believe that. Um, the but I was just thinking about this, we were talking about his dad, Ernie Sr., your grandfather. Um, I didn't really get to know him, but like, I think hundreds of other tribal leaders have heard lots about him and your grandmother over the years. And what really seems to be important, let me talk about his grandfather just a sec. You know, Working in the Nixon administration in particular, they worked for a fellow named Louis Bruce. And Louis Bruce, the group of Indians, the first Indians to be in control of the BIA, that was a game-changing moment. And so all these folks, including Ernie Sr., Ernie Stevens Sr., Lee Cook, Holly's uncle, and there was just solid core of policy-minded, smart folks that were working to change the system from the inside. And that had not happened before their time. And so I know your dad, I know Ernie Jr. Had that distillation of that experience from his dad. And then with your grandma on the AIM side, the activist, he spoke about that. And so, the change from the outside, trying to, you know, put pressure on things, make the invisible visible through activism, you know, I think Ernie was at this unique nexus of the experience of both of his parents that were actually polar opposites, somewhat politically in terms of methodology, right? So, um, and I think he was able to channel those things on demand. I think he probably, you know, spent some experimental time in his earlier years, but he had that finally honed, and he would tell us about it in real time. I want to go out there and give these people tell them what I really think. But I hear my mom. He would literally say something like that. I hear my mom say, "You've got to be a statesman. You can't be the activist here." And he was literally reminding himself in real time as he's telling us. And so that awareness and that ability to apply lessons from both of his parents' experiences, I think is something that clearly differentiates my experience and his. So, uh, but so Ernie was pretty amazing in that regard. And I don't, I'll just finish by saying this to tie it all together. We're not far apart in age, me and Ernie, but I think in his experience, his reality is definitely intergenerational. He has one foot firmly planted in our predecessor's generation, from my perspective, and so he was able to apply that here, and we got the benefit of all of that experience and all that wisdom from the predecessors, our forebears, and he applied it here in the present with some political smarts. and bringing good people on.
Well,
I'll
that's
say
good
something quick
leadership.
to that. I think the one thing that he always taught us, and we were able to observe some of it through our lives, but to hear him sometimes talk about this, but like one thing I always say too is the same way he did is we're blessed with family. I always have a little joke is I look at my mom and dad, like, you can either thank them or blame them, joke. But obviously it's mostly good because they're amazing people, as you guys know, and they have their own way of teaching, their own way of being a parent, and some of it's direct and some of it's through observation as a child growing up and so forth. So he talks about that, or he talked about that sometimes, mostly in a specific situation for a specific reason. About here's what I learned from grandpa. Here's what I learned from mom, grandma. Because they split when they were pretty young, when they were in LA. So they had their own way of directly and indirectly teaching their children. But he observed all that and absorbed all that. So I think he always would talk about how that attributed to his person and who he became as a leader, as an individual. I'm the same way. I mean, growing up, meeting guys, people like you guys, and people in his circles, because of what he does, it's like I learned a lot from everybody, and he talks about the same thing with Grandpa. Um, you know, he feels that he wouldn't be who he was if he hadn't been exposed to Grandpa's networks, right? And has been able to like, oh, you're Ernie's son, and that alone carries so much merit for him as he was coming up when he was younger, on the council and then the national stage because of what Grandpa did. People don't understand. It's kind of crazy going back to Grandpa, what he was able to achieve with the Policy Review Commission. People, other names I'll throw out there. Alan, the Kirk Kickenberg, I think he was from Oklahoma. I was able to interview a few of these folks, and they were able to talk about Grandpa and what they really did. There is no gaming without the Policy Review Commission changing all that. And there's no policy review commission without a non-tribal person saying, hey, we need to change this. Who's a better person for it? Who's the guy we need to do it? It was Grandpa. Same thing happened with Dad. Um, so being exposed to that showed that he was the guy for it. And I think that's something that he would talk about behind closed doors mostly because it was more emotional for him. So that's what I think I learned from him as well as if I'm out there meeting these people, there's a reason for that. And so the legacy, as you always called it, So just want to kind of say that and add to that.
What a legacy too. It was, and I've written on this a couple times about your dad because he was a big man. You know what I mean? I was in Paris with your mom and dad, and your dad got up to walk to the bathroom, and this Parisian guy was right next to your mom. He looks at your dad, he goes, "That's a big Indian," and when people would meet your dad, they were just like see this like with the cowboy boots and the hat, he'd be like 6'8". They're like going, I don't understand how you guys lost to Custer. Doesn't make any sense. And then they'd look at me and they go, okay, now we get it. You know what I mean? So he just left an impact walking in the room. And there's very few people that can do it and they're like that. But, he just had a presence that was, you know, it filled the room as soon as he walked in. So, and I think there was just never a better ambassador for tribal gaming or Indian country period than Chairman Stevens. He looked the part, he walked the part, he was the part, right, Mark? Right out central casting, I think they would say. I think they
That's
might
what
have
I
used
was
that on
gonna.
you once.
I'm lost. I'm lost for words, really. But like I said, he had our backs. We knew he did, and he demonstrated that time and again. There was an earlier description. I think Brandon, you were describing how, uh, he said he needs to go on to the next thing. You'd be home for a bit. He'd tell you what was going on a little, and then you've got to do this, got to do that. There was a relentlessness too in what I don't know what it was like at home, but from the outside looking in and looking at Ernie, he seemed to have this relentless drive to stay in the fight, to stay in the advocacy, to stay. The people needed to learn, they needed to message, and if he could just be there to help lead the way, we would all fall in behind him and do and pick it up too. And now we really have to do that for real. And we don't get to just follow him in the battle, but the relentlessness to, going from one place to another throughout Indian country. I'm generally aware that he would go from a conference to a casino opening to a local regional meeting to a funeral for an elder somewhere on a reservation, whether they had a casino or not. And he did that all the time. And it was it's a hard schedule to keep. And that was all part of what he did though, representing not just Indian gaming, but representing Indian country as a national leader. And he showed us what leadership is, what it could be, and what it should be by doing the things he did. But that relentlessness to continue on to the next thing, I admire it tremendously. And he set a high bar.
Right before the show started, I got a text from the European Casino Association, sending their condolences also. So, I mean, he was international, man, and you know what? Let's talk about what we have planned now. Listen, we don't have a lot planned. We're going to be there for our friends friend this weekend. I arrive Friday, be there Saturday. We're going to have a memorial at the keynote. We'll be talking about Chairman Stevens. But I don't think, we're really going to get an opportunity to celebrate him until our show, right, Jason?
Well, I mean, we're going to be at G2E next week, and certainly for the folks on the call,
NCAI in November.
right? NCAI in November. I think NCAI in November will probably do something a little, the first kind of bigger tribute, if you will, over out there at Seattle. I think that'd be appropriate. And a lot of the tribal leaders there.
Jason, the task force would not exist without Ernie.
Right. That was correct.
NCAI Naga Task Force, yeah.
Correct. And so we'll do something at NCAI for sure, and that's the week before Thanksgiving in November. But like I told the staff and everybody here in DC, this is, he was bigger than life, and he embodied this building. So we're gonna have to the wind down is gonna take some time here, and as we get into 2026, we'll hit the ground running and head towards our trade show. And obviously our trade show will be a celebration of life as well. And really this building though will always, I know he's in the Gaming Hall of Fame already. There's a couple other associations that I know are going to come out and honor him. But really this building, whatever the family decides is appropriate for us to leave here, will be appropriately displayed. And as I told Chairman McCarroll last night, Ernie used to say this is going to be Indian country's building, and we got to keep it in Indian country. And it's not the NIGA building, IGA building. It's got to stay in Indian country's hands. And we're proud that Porch Creek has the mortgage right now. Once the mortgage goes away, maybe a tribal Section 17 corporation comes in and holds it for a while, and we just maybe keep it on a rotating basis or something like that. That's what the future plan was, and Chairman was all for that, because really you don't want to give up this piece of history right here in Capitol Hill, and who better to have it than the tribes. And Chairman McCarroll, we have your tribal history here because Pachanga is the sponsors of the reception area. We've got parts of your treaty up. The Miami tribe of Oklahoma has their removal story on the second floor conference room. And that's really what this was all about, was telling tribes' story. Because as good as the museum is in DC and other things, look what's happening now with, taking down recognition of the massacres that occurred, and, awards that were handed out for murdering women and children. We're going to have to tell our story for the rest of, as long as there's the United States. Tribes have to tell their story. It can't be written for them anymore. And that's part of why your dad kept so much stuff. He always, even if it was John Wooden and Muhammad Ali and a lot of non-Indians that that came, and your dad was able to influence and show them, what tribes are all about and what the history of this country is all about. And thoughtful people appreciate that. They look back upon that, and John Wooden died with a bolo tie that your dad gave him. I think they buried him with it, and so I mean, it's amazing the people you can touch, because that's the kind of people, that's the kind of history people want to read. They don't want censored stuff. They don't want it filtered. We can put it all out there and not be ashamed of anything.
Hey, Victor and Jason, if I could, I want to mention one thing uh, to the family and Ernest and Brandon. Uh, Anything that we can do for you guys, especially at NCAI, because that's where I am. uh, Let us know. Want to take you also cues from the family. If you have suggestions or things that you think we should present or say, let us know. We are just, now starting to conceptualize what that might look like. So, you know, I want to take cues from the family and honor your wishes. If there's any bright lines and, do for us to do or help out with it also in between, working with Jason and Iga. If there's anything that we can do, let us know. Let me know. Brandon, I have your contact information, so let me know about that. Now, whatever you need. But Jason just closed his remark right now on John Wooden and his bolo tie that your dad gave him. I think this bears mentioning. There outside of Indian country, there are so many people that Ernie had as friends, and your dad had as friends, friends in the industry, and even friends outside of the industry. And I think, first of all, your dad connected really well with people. He was just great at connecting with people. I've heard so many and seen so many testimonials how he could make somebody feel just by acknowledging them and what they do, make them feel 10 feet tall. And he had a gift for that. But he also had a gift for, going outside of Indian country and cultivating allies, making friends with people in and outside of the industry, on the hill, to cultivate allies. So many non-Indians are affected by his passing as well in our ally community. And Ernie played a big part in that, in bringing them to the table and in helping them support what we do. And so I think that bears mentioning as well, because he was tremendously gifted at that. So thank you.
Yeah, I guess like with go segueing into like what his legacy is and what he did and all the things that the stories of people would share of just him just being other than sharing stories is just how he helped them. Um, we established immediately the Ernie Stevens Jr. Education Fund because that's what his thing was getting people. He's getting tribal members, getting students and youth to go to school. And so he always said, go to school, go to school, go to school, go to school. And he that was his main thing that he always wanted to do. And to share a little bit, it's like, when we digging through his wallet, he had money in his wallet, a lot of money. And we knew what it was for. Anyone he passed by throughout the day, throughout the week, he would just say, here, dinner on me, here, just to get people by, because he knew what it was like to need that when we were kids. And just a little bit, just sometimes when you're at the end, it's like, it was more than it was more than the money, it was more of the gesture. I want you to succeed. So that led into, when they established the youth commission. He wanted youth to have a voice and not just, and this is what he always told me, he's like, I did not want to put the kids in the back room and have a pizza party. So I wanted the kids to have a voice that was a part of NCI's larger picture. So they would present the resolutions to the body. He wanted to have purpose for the youth commission. And so those are the things that he made happen with Bermuda. and those things he started. And so that's why we started like, you know what, this is
Yeah.
what he wants. He wants,
Yeah.
you know, kids to know who they are. And that's why I think his energy came from family and community. And he knew how important economic development in gaming was to provide for family and the community. And that's what drove him to every single place he could go every single week. He knew how important it was, that message. And if we didn't get gaming, we didn't get economic development, it made it more difficult for our families. And that's why it leads into why he was so great at connecting to people, because he brought his stories with, and he was able to connect individuals and humanize where we came from. They could see the stories in places where we were from, to those people who weren't, they don't know about us.
Yeah.
They come to Oneida, come to, Temecula, to see Pachanga Reservation. I remember being there when he lived there, Pachanga, it was just a fence, right? There's a fence and a little gate and a guy in a little,
There's a tent,
there's a tent. Yeah.
tent and a couple gas pumps and gravel.
Yeah. And
A lot
so,
of gravel. Yeah.
Beautiful gas pumps.
those are the things. And like my grandpa was a visionary. He saw things, and but he wanted to know, how do we get there? It wasn't just this pipe dream. It was like, we have to get here. And by telling the stories, being present in community, he carried that story everywhere. And that's how it's just so great. He knew he made you feel seen, he made you feel important, no matter who you are or what you did or what your title was. That was his gift. And then just knowing, he brought Oneida with him in every door he opened.
That's awesome. Can I ask you guys a question? Um, in his time here in Temecula, living next door here to Pachanga, um, what can you tell me about our great oak tree? Because I know he really liked going there.
I could tell you, we were just talking about this the other day. When I went to visit for Christmas, first off, it was weird because I went outside and it was 74 degrees on Christmas morning. And it felt amazing. It was beautiful. It was a perfect day. Wind was coming
It was a
out
cold
about
day. That was
Santa
a
Ana.
It's a cold day.
Over here, you guys might be cool. But the wind was perfect, and of course, he had to go play basketball and had to win on his new home court and all this and that. But the whole experience was just like brand new, and I knew he was happy. I knew he felt at home there for the short time he was there, because of people like you and others, and I remember he made sure that we saw the oak tree. And I remember being there, and I was just like, 'cause I like trees. When I see a tree off like by itself in the field, I'll pull over, and sometimes I'll go up by it and just like, zen out and stuff. But I'm this thing with trees, right? And we have a couple of trees here that there's an oak and I think a maple that are like super huge that not a lot of people know about. So I remember seeing the tree, and I was just like in awe, and it definitely has a power and an energy coming off it. I mean, it's in the roots, it's in the tree, it was amazing. Just I guess my point. And I remember standing there, and when we were leaving, I kept stopping and looking back at it. I don't know why. I just kept stopping, and looking like, wow, a few more paces, stop, and I just kept looking back at it. This is an awesome experience to see that tree.
Yeah, just a real quick story. We played basketball. That's our thing. We played basketball, and it was windy as all heavens, but he was making every shot. And you can see the
He doesn't
ball.
always make shots
Yeah,
either.
you can see the ball like adjust in the mid air, and he's like, "All right," and he's like, "Oh, the Santa Ana winds got me."
Great.
He'd say, "Oh, Santa Ana winds," but he was making every shot, so it was like, well, it was just something we didn't know, but you could tell he was home. He loved California. Then that's the thing he always talked about. I want to go back. I want to go back. California dreaming. That was his,
Yeah.
that was his favorite song.
He
Oh,
really
yeah,
he did love LA. I mean, he would tell me stories about Hollywood Boulevard, and I was just blown away. I was like, and then that movie came out with Brad Pitt and uh, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And every time I see that, I was like, Ernie told me stories, and he described neighborhoods that look just like that. Those old coffee shops and all those old joints that were down that way, and he said you could just run around there for days, and people would pick you up and drive you where you needed to go, and he said, they were just free and out in the streets, and it's a life that, uh, it really just, it shaped him in so many ways, and I think in a lot of ways, he struggled with the alcohol and all that, but that was part of him too, and he didn't shy away from telling people that he was you know a recovering alcoholic, and I never saw him shy away from that. He was very upfront, and that was another way he connected with people, because if you struggled, he could empathize with you because he struggled in his life, and he knew what that was like. So I mean, that was an amazing thing to see whenever we were around people. But yeah, his love for LA always came out. The Rams are winning the Super Bowl, and I'm like, "Wow, you care about the Rams now?" He's like, "Yeah, back in the day, Roman Gabriel
Oh,
and
yeah, that's
all
back
these
in our days.
guys."
Yeah.
I'm like,
Jack
"Yeah,
Stone,
exactly. Right, so,
Nelson. Yeah.
right." So,
Well,
Would
that was his gift. Like wherever he was, he made people feel welcome, and
mhm.
like this is where I want to be right now. I want to be
Uh,
here on this reservation with you. You know what I
mm,
mean? And he made everybody feel that this was the place to be. I think that was his real gift, and again, and I know you all had the same experience. You'd talk to him and he'd be in the car going somewhere. You'd hear either Ricky or your mom or someone in the car or by himself. You know what I mean? He was always on the road going to the next reservation, going to the next meeting. I used to joke that, a microwave door would open and he would be there. It's an opening. I gotta go. Someone's opening a microwave. I gotta go. He was incredible. Princess events. I mean, he was just and one of my memories, and I don't want to take in, was us while we're traveling in Europe. Him and your mom would wake up at 3 a.m. to watch basketball games because the granddaughters were in a game. You know what I mean? And so that was the most important thing, to make sure that he was watching it, that what his grandkids were doing. And it was very real. It was very genuine. He was not a phony. He was very real. So, gentlemen, we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I want to thank everyone. But I'd like to leave with everybody to give us your favorite memory. Give us your favorite memory of Chairman Stevens. Chairman McCarr, we'll start with you.
Well, okay. One real quick. I put a thing in the chat. I just saw an email from Bill Miller, AGA, and
oh, okay.
he's talking about stuff they're going to do for your dad, Ernest and Brandon at G2E coming up. So anyway, I don't know if he appreciates. I just literally took something from his email.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, um, I have so many favorites, but I want to mention one because of the political times we're in. And I think to me, this is classic Ernie. A number of years ago, at one of the Ledge Summits, it might have been a summer Ledge Summit, me and a couple of other members of my council, we were there, and the format's usually members of Congress come in. I don't know, what's your spacing? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Depends on their availability and who can actually make it. But sometimes they stack up, right? And sometimes you get two or three waiting. One might go on too long. And so there was this one member of Congress. I won't name the party and I won't name the person's name. But the individual, the member of Congress, I will say the person was from the House side, was going on and on and on about a particular candidate for president. And it wasn't usual, here's this bill we're working on, or we help you this way. And one of my council members, who I was not standing near, where I was like 90 degrees away from him, other part of the room, raised his hand when the Q&A portion came up, and he called into question some of the remarks that the member of Congress was making in his presentation to our group of tribal leaders. And he challenged the member of Congress on some of the remarks he was making about the candidate he was advocating for. And that person said, well, okay, no, I don't really want to say his name. So, but it was Butch Murphy on our tribal council at the time. He's now retired. And the member of Congress came a bit unglued and started walking across the floor toward the back of the room toward my member of Congress. And he actually stuck his hand out like this. And Ernie came from my left and intervened like a referee and said, "We are not going to have any of that here." And these are tribal leaders from all over Indian country who come here, and they will be treated with respect, the respect that they deserve as elected officials and of sovereign tribal nations. And he didn't tolerate it. And it was a rare instance that somebody, a member of Congress from Oklahoma, crossed the line like that. And that's all I'll say. But
Sorry.
you know, they had plenty to learn in that instance, clearly. And so that was classic though, because Ernie did not take much guff from the disrespect of tribal leaders, of tribal leadership, of tribal gaming, of Indian country. He was always standing up for our rights and for demanding respect and that is deserved. So that always sticks in my mind, and in particular because of the environment we're in.
Well, what
Yeah,
about you,
and
Jason?
just real quick, one of the things your dad did, much to the chagrin of a lot of us here in the office, he loved to come in right before Christmas. And we'd be like, Ernie, there's nothing going on. Congress was wrapping up, or they're doing one of these stupid CRs, it's big hullabaloo before Christmas, and it always amounted to big nothing. But he always liked to come in, and I don't know if you guys were driving him crazy back home, but we are like, man, all right, come in December 17th or something. And you know what though? Before COVID, it might have been a year or two before COVID, he was here, and it was just, cold and empty, and we were walking around, and out of the blue, we bumped into Senator Moran from Kansas, and he started talking, and was out in front of Pete's Diner, and then talking about Haskell and all that stuff, and then lo and behold, here comes another senator, and they start talking, and then here comes Lamalfa was another one because I remember him. He's a big guy. He came walking by, and next thing you know, your dad's holding court there talking to different senators and congressmen, and in a lot of ways maybe that's the time to come because they're not on some crazy schedule and running from one meeting to the next. They have time to sit and talk. But I remember that specifically with your dad, and just the way he would relate to people and talk. He always talked with Lamalfa about boxing and other things, and of course Senator Moran and the tribes in his state and the importance of Haskell. So I mean, that's the kind of person he was, and that knowledge and that background of Indian country is something that is hard to replicate, hard for a lot of people to replicate. I can't go that far back, but your dad could, so it was incredible.
All right, and gentlemen, if you could give us one last story about your wonderful father. We're gonna miss him so much, and like Jason said, it's gonna be hard to replace. All that institutional knowledge, all that cultural knowledge, all that reservation knowledge. Um, what would you like to leave us with?
Yeah, something.
I'm gonna keep the stories, but I'll just more so like reflect on what he would want. And I think um, when someone passes, we always want to say who's gonna fill the shoes. And I think he's a generational leader where he's bridging the past to where we're at today, and having as Chairman President McCarr was saying, had that one foot in the old ways, and I think he replicated everything that we need to stay today: visiting, slowing down, getting to know people, um, and making sure people feel seen. And I think that's what and I think that's a community thing. Community needs to step up to fill his shoes to do that. And I think that's where his passing will leave his mark by making us step up, all of us to step up to fill his shoes to do exactly what he lived by connecting people, telling stories, and sharing the loved ones that have passed. That's one thing he did really well. He'd always talk about people who have passed, and he'd tell stories. And it's more about keeping the memory rather than holding on to things. And so I would just leave with that as just, that's what he would want. And that's what I think he really was about.
Yeah,
Well, gentlemen, go ahead. Go ahead, E3.
but mine's pretty short and sweet. I think I'm thinking of this because I'm kind of going through it now. My son is my son Daniel's a senior at Southwest High School here in town, and he's got 3 games left. And um, I remember when I was a senior at West Superior, we were big conference champs '98, and we were kind of favored to go to state, and we ended up losing to, I don't even say the team's name. They went on a winning state, by the way, by just beating everybody by at least 20. They beat us by a field goal. And 3 of our touchdowns were called back. It's just a horrible game. And it was my last game. And it wasn't, I didn't like cry. I was just pissed. You know what I mean? I was just like, oh, oh, wow, how does it end like that? And I remember walking up. My dad had made it to all my games, all our games, basketball, football, every game he was there. And he always stood at the same spot by the fence. He never went up to the bleachers. He was always by the fence. And I remember walking after we got to with our post game talk. We were walking out off the field, or I was walking out the field, kind of hanging my head. I look up, and my dad's walking along with me, kind of, along the fence, going to meet me at the gate right as I'm walking out. I could tell he was upset. And I walk out the gate. He just goes, "Hey man, you played your best." He hugged me and looked at me, and he's like, he was about to cry himself. And I was just like, that moment, I was like, wow, I never really thought of that until then, like how much he was just there and how much he cared about us. And it was just high school sports. At this point, like who cares? But at that time, it affected me. He just was there and he hurt with me. And so that moment, I was like, wow, that's kind of, I just remember that particular moment because he was sad for me. And I was more pissed. He was more sad. But I think he thought like, I just knew there was like some kind of a thing in the way he walked with me and he just met me patiently as I was just kind of hanging my head, moping my way out. That's a special moment for me because I just realized like, wow, he's just this is different. I'm gonna be like this when I'm a dad.
He left an example, and I think you're both right. Family was everything, and we all knew that. But I think Brandon, you're absolutely right. I think we all have to step up. I think that's what he would want, and that's what he wants from us. He showed us that's what a leader does. They lead. So he showed us the template, the roadmap, and how to do these things, how to do them with grace, how to do them with dignity. And
Yeah.
I hope you find peace in this. I want you to know that everyone in Indian country is thinking of you. Everyone's thinking of your mother and your family. And he was very important to us. And we just want to thank you for lending us for him the time that we had him. We really appreciate that because he served us, and we appreciate all he did and all you did. And Chairman McCarl, thank you very much, or as I like to call him, Cousin Mark. Thank you very much. And Jason, you too, man.
Yeah.
You were a great ally with Chairman Stevens. You guys made a phenomenal team and still do.
I mean, it's hard to believe he's gone, and I think it's probably not going to hit home for me until I get up there to see you guys and the family, because I had most of us had just talked to him that day, the week before he had been in DC with everybody walking around, and I still am expecting him to call on my commute home every day, waiting for that Ernie call, and I was doing it last night, and I was like, damn, he's not here. It just keeps hitting you in different ways. So. But we'll see you up there, and I'm anxious to get up there and honor your father. So
If I may say one more thing real quick to the 3 of you and to folks listening and watching, a lot of us are talking about the impact that my father had on them and individuals. I don't think we talk enough about the impact that folks like you 3 and other people have had on him. He talks about it at home. All 3, you 3 in particular, but he's heard a lot about you. Jason, you were always like a kind of like a nephew, or even almost like a son to him. The way he talked about you, he always talked about West Point and how smart you are, this and that. Mark, you're always like a brother, this person he always looked up to and learned from for so many years. Victor, you're just like a friend that kept him grounded and kept him moving forward and kept him focused. And everybody had an attribute that impacted him in so many ways. There's so many people, and I think that's the part we can talk about more as well. Is I wish he could have told all these people that, but I can tell you 100% all my heart that all you folks out there had an impact on him as well, and that made a difference in the work that he did.
We were very fortunate to have a good friendship. Mark, you're on mute.
I said thank you for sharing that.
Thank you guys. Thank
Yeah,
you so
thank you,
much.
gentlemen. We'll see you on Friday,
Yeah.
and we'll all be there to send our friend off. And
Mhm.
there'll never be another one like him. He was one of one. So everyone, thank you for
Thank
joining
you guys.
us, and we'll be in Vegas next week at G2E, and then we'll be back the week after. The mission continues, the legacy continues. We will march forward. So thank you,
Back to
everyone.
work Monday, as you said.
Ernest,
Yeah, there it is.
Brandon, thank you. Chairman
You
McCarl,
guys,
my brother Jason,
see
thank
you
you,
guys soon.
everyone. We'll see you guys real soon, and thank you guys for coming. We really appreciate it. Much
Thank
My
love.
you guys.
pleasure.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.